Thank you. Hello, Doug here with my guest, Brett Atterbury, as always. And we have a special guest today. She's beautiful. I convinced her to join us on this. Actually, I didn't have to do much convincing. When she's overheard Brett and I doing some of these recordings, I'll walk out of the office and she will bombard me with ideas and topics, and it just made a lot of sense that we should have.
And charitable critiques, maybe.
They're always charitable, and there's lots of critiques when it comes to Doug. But it made sense to have Nicole Hewlett on with us today to offer some a woman's perspective and just to jump into this conversation of where we are in society and how men have been tasked with the duty of preserving the dignity of every woman. And we're living in a society, we're living in a time where, man, honestly, I feel like everyone wants to shirk their responsibility, especially men. And I know I tried calling you this week, Brett, to share an idea I had, but you didn't answer the phone and you didn't call
You
me
shouldn't
back.
take that personally. That's kind of normal. I never answer the phone for anybody.
Oh, great. Well, that's good. I'm glad if I'm ever on fire or in critical need of something, I won't call you.
Just if you text, I'll text back. Brett, I'm on fire. I'm dying. Okay, be right there.
So I had this thought this week about contrarian men, right? I think society wants to paint this picture that Jesus was, a just kind, and everything he said was like just peace, love, and happiness. And he was like a hippie. That's essentially what people describe. And the long hair, that we always depict Jesus as having doesn't help the idea of him not being a hippie. But he was a contrarian. And when we think today of men who are strong, I think a lot of times we're picturing men who are contrarian. And that's somewhat what I think we're discussing. You and I have been having these conversations about men who are willing to go against the grain of society and take a role that is different than what society is preaching. And I don't know, it was just a thought that I had this week about how, we are called as men to not go along with whatever narrative is currently in society as, oh, this is what we should be doing. I think one of those things is one of those narratives that we continue to hear about today is, men and women are the same. We're the same. There should be equal, women out there being steam fitters and, equal, not that women aren't capable, but that we are like in every respect. And, I think there are plenty of men that just go, yeah, no, yeah, whatever. I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want to get canceled at work. So I'm just going to say yes to whatever I'm being told. So in any event, those are just some of the thoughts bouncing around in my head this week.
Yeah,
hold on. Can we have Nicole just make a quick introduction and say hello?
Oh, that's a good idea.
As Doug said, I am Nicole Hewlett. I am his wife. And I'm a stay-at-home mom. I homeschool, and we have a 8-year-old daughter.
Yep.
Nicole, what's your background professionally?
Oh, so I actually, I went to school for, I got a bachelor's in biology and I got my master's in speech language pathology. So I was a speech pathologist for, I'd say about, 10 years. And then after I had Gemma, I couldn't go back. It was too hard. I didn't want to. I always said when we had, a child that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And that's what I'm getting to do. And I love every minute of it. It's challenging, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
and you live on a ranch with Doug and Gemma and a bunch of chickens and what other
Yes.
what do y'all have now? You got all kinds of stuff. Last time I was there, you had chickens, and I think that was
We
it. But you were
have,
adding stuff.
yes, we have 9 hens and a rooster. We have 3 barn cats and a fish.
Sometimes a fourth barn cat.
Sometimes a 4th barn cat.
Yeah.
He shows up every now and then. He was here for a while, and then he took off, and then now he comes back sporadically. He should have just stayed.
He's nomadic. He's just spreading the love around to other barns as well.
Yeah, he should have stayed though, because the poor thing looks like he's been in some battles lately. So
Yeah. I thought y'all were going to get some pigs. That comes later.
no.
No, no pigs.
No.
Other small animals. Okay,
No
like
pigs.
quail
One
or
day
something.
we'd like a donkey, but until then, she's just stuck with this jackass.
Ah. Hey, thank you, Nicole. Doug, something I was thinking about. To your Jesus as the granola eating hippie, love, love, love. I've always thought that was a funny caricature and strange in some respect. And I know some of those movies, especially some of the Jesus movies, like back in the 70s and 80s, kind of had that. I call it the weepy, wimpy Jesus, And I was like, if you just kind of, when you read scripture sometimes, if you just kind of step back and think about it, and it's like he attracted like the scourge of society who wanted to sit with him. He wasn't coercing anybody. Like tax collectors, sinners, and prostitutes wanted to come and commune with him. And you start to think about that, and even if you kind of like look at that in our own society, like people who are suffering from those kinds of ills and conditions, it's like, what kind of person would it take for them who was so unlike them, yet so attractive, that they actually said, this guy is so interesting, I just can't help myself. I've got to go like sit with this guy. I've got to listen to this guy. I have to have dinner with this guy. I have to commune with this guy. It wouldn't be the wimpy, granola eating wimpy kind of person. So this is a goal for you, Doug, something that you aspire to get out of that mode. It'd be someone who's like really cool, who's really strong, and not strong in this kind of, our society kind of has this machismo kind of thing about men and strength. Not like that, but just someone who was like, just had this air about him, about there's a strength in this man and the things that he says and the way that he holds himself up, the way that he acts, the way that he treats others. There's just something about him that's really attractive. And I want to know what that is. I want to learn more about that.
No, that's a great point, right? I think, I've known a bunch of people that were in the military, and not obviously it doesn't account for all of them, but so many of them are wonderful storytellers for some reason. And that's kind of what I see. I guess in some ways, when I think of the man that Jesus was on earth, I think of someone who's maybe been to battle, been through some sort of training, and can sit and then relate those stories that I, as someone who didn't serve, I can appreciate. I can put myself into that story, into that narrative, and see what it would be like to have been there because of the way they tell a story. But there's a quiet masculinity, a quiet strength without fear, right? It's not like, this person is a terrifying individual and like, holy crap, I'm wrapped with attention because of, how scary they are. I'm afraid they're going to attack me if I don't pay attention, but rather just this warm sense of they've seen things, they know things, and are capable of telling a story that could maybe change how I view the world because of the things that they've seen, the unfortunate things that they've seen. So I don't know. Again, my thoughts.
Well, then I'm gonna have to lift you up here when it comes to the storytelling thing. as much as it pains me. Here we go. So, we were talking about humility in a previous episode. And when you think about, Jesus humbled himself, just becoming, God becoming man, talk about an ultimate act of humility. And as he's telling those stories and relating those stories, we can just and I kind of see it in that, the series, The Chosen, with Jonathan Rumi plays Jesus, that kind of just deep humility and storytelling. And as you were saying that, it brought me back to your recent story, which you told about, something that you'd been through and how you reflected on that, how you changed your mind about that and decided to become public about something and be very transparent about something that was difficult for you to do, because we all have pride. Men especially suffer from pride. But you just kind of sucked it up and told the story in such a humble way, such an honest way. And I just remember, because you posted that on LinkedIn and the comments that came back from that. And of course, a lot of it was, supporting you, Doug, I'm here for you and all that kind of stuff. But there were so many comments too that were just like, man, kudos to you for just being humble and being transparent and being willing to have the courage to tell that kind of story. So I imagine, man, when men, as you did as an example, Jesus, obviously the ultimate example, when men humble themselves and are willing to share things that aren't comfortable, share about their failings, share about their weaknesses, that's a very strong thing to do, because then the other men can drop the mask and stop lying to themselves and lying to everybody else and trying to maintain some kind of fake persona that's not them, right? And I think as soon as, and you and I have experienced this in Acts retreats, for example, as soon as men realize that they don't have to keep up the act anymore, that they can be themselves and be honest about their failings, about their weaknesses, about their fears, it changes them inside. It almost seems like there's this transformational process that happens. And you and I, we three would know that as the Holy Spirit. Once you've gotten your pride out of the way and all of those obstacles to the Holy Spirit, things can really start to happen in your life.
I think I don't know if that, I don't see the mic picking up. Okay.
Passing the mic back and forth.
That would have been impossible. The story that you were talking about, where I kind of confessed, what was going on and how I had been fired from a job, and that wouldn't have been possible for me to do that if it wasn't for Nicole, right? I mean, even up until the moment that I kind of shared just the deep amount of stress. I got to a point where I wasn't sharing necessarily with Nicole how I was feeling. She knew I was trying to figure things out and secure full-time employment. I was trying to make a side business. I was trying to make that work to be able to provide for the family. But I hadn't shared with Nicole exactly how I was feeling, which was like an elephant was sitting on my chest. And, that was me being a foolish man, right? Trying to wear that mask, trying to pretend as if everything was okay. And I got this, I can take care of it. And I want to consider myself a man of faith, but I still even though I try my best to pray and to go to God and ask for help, I was still unwilling to share with the person on this earth who is the closest to me. And when I finally revealed to Nicole how I was feeling and what was going on, and when she did what she did for me, which was she went to God, she wrote a prayer for me. And when she gave me that prayer that I then started reading, every day, that took a massive amount of weight off of me. And I suddenly felt like I could breathe and that things were going to be okay, because she, the the person who I have chosen to spend the rest of my life with. It's so funny. Like as a guy, I feel like, oh, so what you can't tell here, I'm 6'2". Nicole is 4'11". Okay.
Nicole is not 6'2".
No, and 3/4.
Yeah.
Don't forget the 3/4.
Yeah.
I used to be 5 feet and 1/4 inch.
Still hoping to get there.
So I have this feeling like, oh, I need to protect my wife. And I don't think I'm revealing any major secret here. She's a little high strung, right? Like if she was 6'2", she'd have a normal amount of stress, but because she's so compact, it's very tightly wound. And
Is that a compliment?
I was trying to protect her.
Yeah.
And in reality, when I not unburdened myself, but was shared with her what I was truly feeling, she was able to unburden me with that. And, I was preventing my wife I was preventing her from being able to be my wife, right? I was preventing her from being able to help me the way I help her with things. And I don't know, maybe you could kind of talk about that time, what was going on, or I don't know if that would be helpful.
Yeah. So for me, he did keep it a little bit under wraps from me for a bit. And then he did mention to me, that work had put him on a, performance improvement plan, which, isn't always a positive thing. And, I immediately, went to God in prayer. And at the time I had been walking by myself in the morning, and that would be my prayer time. And God, I really gave God a chance. Sometimes I do a lot of talking to God, but I don't always give, him a chance to respond. And I was intentional about hearing from him. And, I felt that he was telling me, clear as day, that I didn't need to worry, that I just needed to have faith in him and trust in him, and he would take care of us. And it was so profound that I really did have this peace. And honestly, like I remember that morning I was walking up the driveway and I looked down at the ground, and and it's still there. I've left it there. There was a rock in the shape of a heart. And for me, I call those God winks. And for me, that was just God telling me, like, I love you and I love your family, and everything is going to be fine. Just let me show you what I'm capable of. Trust in me, and, just let me do what I do best. And so at that moment, I felt like, I gave it to God. And don't get me wrong, I was certainly not at peace during certain times, and, anxiety and stress and would, build up in me at times. And especially when I would go and talk to him, and I would be in a good mood, and then I'd go talk to him, and I could just, the anxiety and stress that he was carrying would just radiate, and I would just absorb it. And that one particular day, I was just like, that's it. Like, I need to write a prayer and give it to him, because he's just, he needs to release this and give it to God. And, 5 years ago, if this had happened, I probably wouldn't have responded in the same way. I definitely, God's peace, it says in the Bible that God's peace surpasses all understanding. And it does, because during this past year, I, financially, where we have been and continue to be at this point, there's no way 5 years ago I would have been at peace. But it just, I feel like it just shows how much I've grown, how much God has sanctified me. And, it's an ongoing process, and he's continuing to do that. But I felt God's peace. And I needed Doug to feel his peace as well. So I sat down and I wrote him a prayer, and I gave him that prayer, and you know, it helped him. And you know, I think as a married couple, right? I mean, God God ordained marriage between a man and a woman, and it's a beautiful thing. And we're actually doing a Bible study right now, um, called You and Me Forever, and it talks about marriage in light of eternity and what our, like, we as a married couple are supposed to be a light to those around us, and we are supposed to bring the gospel to others through our marriage and how we live our life as a married couple. And when God created man and woman, you know, he created a woman, the woman for, you know, Eve for Adam as a helper. We are a helper to our husbands. And you know, when the word submission comes up, there's a lot of, you know, people don't like to hear that.
Yeah.
But in a healthy marriage, in a marriage where a man is a God-fearing man, the word submission never really comes up. It's just a natural thing, and it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And I consider myself to be his helper.
Nicole, first of all, thank you for, I just have so many questions. Thank you for the beautiful story. I'm going to kind of work backwards here. Um, Submission in our culture, in the culture of the United States, where, freedom, 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 rights, rights, rights. Nobody
Mhm.
takes away from me my freedom. Nobody takes away from my rights. And then you hear a word like submission. And I think to Americans, that's like, even when I hear it, my immediate reaction, I have an emotional reaction to that word, and it's not good. It's like, nobody submits me, right? Nobody is an authority over me. Maybe God, yes, but not man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said something really interesting, though, which is you qualified it by if you're a wife married to a God-fearing man. Because how many times have I heard, even from Christian men, like writing things and stuff like that? Well, they'll basically take out what is it? 1 Corinthians chapter 15, something like that, where it says, "Wives, be submissive to your husbands," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And and men can take that and use it as like a sledgehammer, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to like, oh, I'm the boss of you. I've even heard it from a friend recently that that her now ex-husband would kind of, when things got really tense, wouldn't use that Bible verse, but more or less had that kind of attitude toward
Mm-hmm.
her, like, I'm the boss here. When really, I loved what you said, because it's a partnership, right? It's a team, and ultimately, whatever that word submissive, ultimately, it's like, okay, in certain things, as the team goes forward, like the husband's going to be stronger at certain things, leads. Some things, obviously, the wife is going to be stronger and leads in those things, right? And it's a team. But if you're not with a God-fearing man, or let's kind of back it out, even maybe from the Bible, and just say a virtuous man. If you're not a virtuous man, you're going to take advantage of those kinds of words like submissive, and you should be submissive to me. I'm the boss of you. I'm the man of the house. All those kinds of things. Instead of a virtuous man, I believe, looks at that partner, looks at the helper who is there in the household, and says, we do this together as a team. We go forward as a team. We win as a team. We lose as a team. We lift each other up when one or the other loses. And I think that's so beautiful and so impressive. So thank you for that. Question for you. You said, if this had happened 5 years ago, you would not have had the same reaction. And what happened, you said in your growth, spiritual virtue, holiness, but what was it that caused you, do you think, to have that kind of growth where here you are 5 years later and your reaction to that was very different than it would have been 5 years ago?
Honestly, I think it's, just spending more time with God, not just going to church on Sundays, not just, saying a prayer at night or a prayer in the morning. It's actually spending time in the Word and learning about God and getting to know God and his character and his ability and all of that. I think, I'm part of a Bible study here in my neighborhood. It's just women. And, I think, honestly, we don't realize it when we're going through things, but when we look back, we can see how God is working in the details, or how he's worked in the details. It's not, always evident, when you're going through something, or, during certain times in your life. But when you take a minute and you look back along
Yeah.
the way, you see, like, man, God was really working and lining things up. And I think about the Bible studies that I've been doing and the scriptures that I've been brought to, just how much God has been preparing me and my heart for this. And just, one of the things that I thought about in Bible study, one of the things that was brought up was to think about the things that God has done for you in the past, to remember those things. And it reveals a lot about his character. And, one of the things that I've learned is that, faith, it doesn't matter how big or small your faith is. That's not what's important. What's important is that you understand who God is, his character, and his ability. Because when you do, it doesn't matter how big or little your faith is. You are going to act in such a way and obey God in such a way that faith is evident. It's our obedience to God that reveals our faith. And it's not how much or little, it's nothing to do with that. It's what are we willing to do in obedience to God based on what we know about him and his character and his abilities. And I think just being in the Word, being in Bible studies, learning from others, has really just, helped me to go to the Word, be in his presence when I feel that anxiety starting to well up inside of me, and just remember what he's done in the past, and that, I don't need to fear, because he's got me.
Man, I love that, especially we're told to live in the present because that's all there is, and I love that. And don't look behind. But I'd say there's maybe an exception to that, and don't look behind at the mistakes and the silly things like that, but look behind in gratitude for
Yes.
what God has done for you. Because I have to do that too sometimes. You all know my story because we're good friends, and the things that God has done in my life the last 10 to 20 years, it's just, it blows my mind. And occasionally we all live life, right? Life, day-to-day life is hard, and things happen, and it's complex, and there's things that happen that aren't always positive. Of course, we live in a broken world. But man, when you sit down and calmly look back at how God set things up for you, how God took care of you, how God provided for you, it's just incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, Nicole, you're so good at this. I'm starting to have a thought. Maybe we should like send Doug on retreat, and you can be the new. I'm starting to think, how can we do the sheepdog sisterhood? How do we do that? Future expansion plans. But thank you so much for that. It's a beautiful story, Doug. You're very fortunate to have such a strong wife like Nicole.
No,
I tr-
I certainly
You
am.
better say something there real quick.
No, I recognize. Look, I fell in love with Nicole and proposed after 2.5 months of dating. I recognized that there was
Wow.
a thing there that, God had clearly put. I mean, almost by happenstance, a woman in my path, and I scooped her up as quickly as I could, proposed, and we got married 1 year from our first date, like to the day. Um, this morning I was doing that cold plunge again, and I was listening to the scripture for the day, which was the story of the loaves and fishes, right? And at the end of it, I was listening on the Hallow app, and it's the voice of Jonathan Rumi reading the scripture for the day, and there's a bit of a meditation at the end, and it said, like, what jumped out at you from this story? And this morning, the thing that I kept thinking about was, okay, there's 5,000 people there that got fed that day, and amongst them there were 5 loaves and 3 fish. And imagine, I guess what jumped out at me was the generosity of others, and how great things can be accomplished when we allow others to work in our lives, as well as when we in fact do the working for others. And that was what I was thinking about this morning, was how through this last year, where we've had a lot of difficulty and struggle, and certainly growth and development in our faith, it was through the generosity of others that I think really showed us that we weren't alone, right? I mean, at one point, a neighbor gave us a check for, or was it cash? It was cash, I think.
Cash.
But a neighbor gave us money. And I mean, honestly, like the day before, we were looking at things going like, I don't know how we're going to make this work. Like, A plus B equals C. And we don't have C at the moment. And a neighbor gave us money. We didn't ask. They just knew. And it turned out, they had said that they had won some sort of raffle and felt called to share it with us. It's like they happened to know what was going on, but just we've been so incredibly blessed and fortunate, but it was because of other people, right? I think sometimes we expect God to, like, a booming thunderous voice from the clouds, and and he parts the cedars here on the property and provides for us what it is we need. But the reality is he works through others. And
Amen.
I think you and I, what we're trying to accomplish with the Sheepdog Brotherhood is we want to be that generous spirit for others. We want to show men not how to be men, because that's such a corny term. And let's be honest, I don't really picture you swinging an axe. Okay.
Hey, you don't know me well, brother.
But we want to show other men what it means to be a man as God sees us. And what does that mean for the impact that we have for our wives, for our daughters, for our sons, for our parents? How do we be men in a way that we're called to be men? And what does that actually mean, right? It's not, knowing jujitsu necessarily. It doesn't mean that you could walk into a room and beat everybody to a pulp. It's not that. And, look, there's a component of that, right? I mean, like we can't be fit in our spirituality, but weak in our physicality. We need to do all of those things. This is the temple of the Holy Spirit, our bodies, and we need to take care of the stuff that we put in. Look, Jesus said that, what we put into our bodies does not defile us. It's what's inside of us that comes out. And, at the same time, we still need to take good care of our physical health so that we can continue to be healthy, so that we can take care of the people that we love and care about, but also to be able to be a good example. I'm rambling.
Can I make a point?
Yeah,
but if just as, think about this, it's like a lot of times you'll see it in movies and things like that. It's like, to that caricature, that man that you were talking about, he's a man's man, it's like, oh, he's big, he's buff, he's good looking, he drives the nice cars, and I don't know, he's got kind of that aggressiveness about him, like almost like a alpha male dog kind of guy. You think about, well, okay, there's nothing wrong with those trappings necessarily, but is that really a man? Is that really a man's man? Because if that guy like died the next day and sitting there at the funeral, it's like, who's going to get up and talk about, man, that guy had an incredible biceps, and golly, that was the coolest car I've ever seen. That dude could bench 400 pounds. Just man, I'm so sad he's gone. Right. What you really want to hear is like, this was a man of service, right? This is the way he loved. This is how he loved his spouse. This is how he loved his children. How he loved his parents, how he loved his siblings, how he loved his coworkers, his friends, and just all of them coming up and telling stories about how this man in his life just reflected love. That's all anyone cares about. It's all they're going to remember, right? They're going to remember about all the physical stuff. And I agree with you. There's not necessarily anything wrong with those things, but to your point about it's the inside out. And I've done this a couple times. I wish I made this like a daily habit where I would say, I'm going to live this day, and all I'm going to focus on is other people in my life. I'm not going to think about myself. Now, this is kind of impossible to do, but I'm going to completely focus on others and just do things for others and pray for others and think about others. Every time I've done that, it's the best day of my life. It's like you finish the day and you just feel incredible. It's amazing. And I give an example. This happened once when my, back in time with my ex-wife. She was Japanese. We would take our children over to Japan. That is a long flight. It's like 14 hours. And this is when the kids were little, and 14 hours with like a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, and like a 11-year-old. Imagine that. Just be patient, kids. We're almost there. Just 10 more hours. Hang in there. It was tough, right? And so I decided, I remember once we'd done it, and man, it was really stressful. And then maybe this was a Holy Spirit thing. I had this one trip, and I did that exact thing. I was like, all I'm going to do is on this 12-hour flight is serve my wife. I'm not going to watch movies. I'm just whatever she needs to help us keep these kids from going bananas on the plane. That's what I'm going to do. Nothing else. I'm just going to keep asking her, how can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? And it was a great flight. It was a great flight. Everything went amazing. And I got off the kids, believe it or not, were like, I don't know, it's an aura about you or something. They were like much more controlled than usual, or just much more well-behaved. When I got off that flight, I was like, dang, there's a secret here. There's something going on here where if you'll just like intentionally, and believe me, you have to do it intentionally. You have to have in your mind, it's like a workout for the day. that this is what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to focus on loving others and serving others. And anyway, I had that thought. Nicole, you were going to say something.
No, to piggyback off of what Doug was saying, I was thinking about, just, as a society, we've decided to pigeonhole, and characterize, okay, like a female has these qualities and a male has these qualities. And, and that's how it has to be. And, now it's so perverted that, we've, come to this idea that, well, if you as a male have all of these like qualities that, characterize a female, then maybe you are a female. Maybe you need to, to change your gender, right? And it's ridiculous. And I think rather than embracing the fact that, we are all unique and God made us male and female, and that's it. And when you are born what you are, and you can't change it. But there's nothing wrong with, a little girl being a tomboy. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that she was meant to be a boy. It just means that that's where she's bent. She likes being my daughter loves being outside in the dirt. She will dig in, we have clay here. She will dig in the clay and her hands will be covered and she loves it. Mm-hmm. But she also loves playing with Barbie dolls. But then you've got some girls who grew up never wanting to play with Barbie dolls. And they just wanted to be outside, playing baseball or running around or riding their bike or, and just because boys, gosh, here's a funny story. My dad, my Nana, my dad's mom, they had 5 kids. Okay. The first 4 were boys. She was dying for a girl, dying. Finally, the 5th was a girl. So, but when they teased my father, because when my father was born, apparently he liked to push around a baby carriage. And, they would tease him and,
that's what
they would tease my Nana and say that she wanted her little girl so badly. And, and my father would push around a baby carriage and, but my dad, I look at my dad and he is like, when you think of a godly man, like he's such an amazing examam. He is a devoted husband. He is a devoted father. He is now, I watch how he is with all of his little grand girls that he has. He has, Gemma and then my 3 nieces. So he has 4 grandkids, little girls. And he's just, he worked hard. He provided. He is a praying man.
He's a veteran.
He's a veteran. Do you know what I mean? So no matter how much his family will tease him and they'll joke around and they'll call him Linda, and it's really funny. But it's a joke because it's okay for, guys and girls to have, mixed qualities of what you think male or female is supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And why can't we just embrace that as differences? And when we think of God, right? When we think of, we're made in the image of God, right? And God has all of those qualities, right? He's a nurturer. When you think, some of the scriptures and how they describe, God and hiding you under, he hides you under his wings. And, like it's the hens that hide their chicks under the wings, not the roosters, right? And, but God, like he has all of those qualities and we're made in his image. So it's really sad that our society has decided to pigeonhole, well, if you're a man, you need to have these qualities. And if you're a female, you need to have these qualities. And we're all different, and let's embrace those differences and embrace God's design for male and female and our God-given roles. We were given, roles, male and female roles. And it doesn't mean that, one or the other is more important, or their roles are better. It just God equipped men, with particular roles, and he equipped females with particular roles, and we complement each other.
Yeah.
And society has just, wreaked havoc on God's design. And, honestly, it's a spiritual battle, right? I mean, it's
Sure.
not the people, it's a spiritual battle. And these people are held captive to a thought and an ideology that is just, it's awful and it's sad.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the complementarity aspect that you brought about it, because back to we're a team striving forward, husband and wife
Mhm.
on mission to love God with all our hearts, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And certainly we do that individually, of course, but there was some, I'll have to go find this. I think it was one of the great Catholic saints that said something about in the modern world, we'd say 1+1 = 3, but he said it in a much more theological kind of beautiful way about the power of a faith-filled couple, a faith-filled marriage, and the impact that has in the world. And you'll hear people say all the time that that it's the family that's the foundation of society. And those things that you're talking about, Nicole, do appear to be spiritual attacks, based on breaking up the family, causing division within the family, causing confusion, which leads to division. And if the family falls apart, one could say, then there goes your whole society.
Mhm.
One thing I wanted to which I take notes while you're saying these amazing things, great. It's great to have you on, Nicole, because when Doug's talking, I usually don't have anything to write down to talk about. It's like he doesn't really say anything that profound, which maybe that's one of the reasons I love him, so I can be the one that says all the profound things. But you say so many profound things. I'm like writing all these notes, and I was like, gosh, we could spend hours talking about this. But you brought up something, so thank you for that, because it's the struggle with Doug sometimes. Um, the idea of I would just call practicing. So when you were talking about the difference between your reaction 5 years later versus
Mhm.
how you might have reacted 5 years before, and I think that's so important, because whether you're doing Bible studies, and even if you're doing Bible studies, how are you engaging with what you're discussing there? How are you putting that into practice? Or are you going just to like check a box?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people go on Sundays, Catholic, Protestant, doesn't matter, to check the box. So I did my Sunday thing. Are they really listening? Are they really taking in what the pastor says or what the priest says and saying, how does that apply to my life? How can I get better? How can I do that in my life? And then not just how, but, now that I figured something out, what am I actually going to do? Because it's through the practice of these things, that's where it starts to stick and form you and change how you are. Otherwise, you're just kind of participating. It's a participation trophy. I shouldn't bring that up in our woke world. Don't get me started on participation trophies. But you're just participating, and you're staying up in your head, right? It's not becoming like part of who you are and how you're going to act in the world. So it's, kudos to you. And that's how, and certainly in the Sheepdog Brotherhood, we would challenge men. It's like, you can't just talk about these things. It's
Mhm.
like you have to like put them into practice. You have to do things like the little example I gave a while ago about my trip to Japan. It's like you got to like implement these things, not just believe them, but actually do them. So, Nicole, thank you for doing that. You're a good model for your husband.
Thank you.
Man, I like piled on you today, man. I'm so sorry, brother.
It's okay. I've got wide shoulders. I can handle it. I had this thought this week that I was sharing with Nicole about, right, where we want to be disciples of God, and the base word of disciple, or an extrapolation of the word disciple, is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And none of these things, we don't become disciples of God accidentally, right? We have to make an active choice to do things, often things that are hard. We were just reading this morning, that was really calling focus to the fact that, like, it's not an easy path.
Yeah.
God, Jesus didn't call us to, like, he didn't say, pick up the pillow and sleeping bag and follow me, pick up your air mattress and be comfortable. It was pick up your cross and follow me. And when we think of someone who is disciplined, we think of people who choose a harder path. They choose a task that they endeavor to complete. And sometimes they fail, but they're working towards becoming better at a thing. And that takes discipline. And to be a good husband, to be a good wife, it requires making an active choice to do something that is probably harder than not doing it. And, to the point that you made, Brett, right? Focusing on other people. The days when you focus on someone else, you have a much better day than when you're all about Brett. And, the goal of these episodes, the goal of this content that we're trying to create is to help show men that what we know we need in society right now is disciplined men. Men who are willing to choose to do something that's hard, because not everybody can do hard things. And, we have to make the choice to pray. We have to make the choice to put our spouses before ourselves. We have to make the choice to go, you know what? I'm not going to look at that thing that I know is a trap for me. I'm going to avert my eyes. It's easier. My gut says, like, look at that, or maybe not my gut, but my lustful side says to look at those images. We have to choose not to.
Yeah.
We have to make those hard choices and do the right thing. So if we want to be disciples, we have to start with first discipline.
I love that. And the other part of discipline, Doug, you've mentioned probably on our first episode. You and I both have track backgrounds up through college, and discipline, not just the discipline to do the right thing, to learn the techniques, to learn the training and all the things that go along with that, but to stick with it for the long term. Because you were a sprinter, I was more of a middle distance, long distance guy, but I could go on a 10-mile run once. That's not going to do much, right? If I go a 10-mile run, let's say five times a week for 1 year, wow, I'm transformed. I am a different runner. In the race, assuming I have a certain level of talent in a 10-mile race against other people, I will, using St. Paul's words, I will run the race, I'll win the race, right? But I just go out and practice it once every now and then. I don't really build up the muscles to be able to succeed, to be able to win. Is it any different in virtue and holiness? I mean, it's like, well, yeah, I was a great dude on Sunday, but the other 6 days of the week, I was a total self-absorbed butthead, Well, that's not going to cut it. It's like, because the majority of your time was spent being that kind of person, not the one time you were the exception. It has to be the exact inverse. That we all know we're going to fall, but make that the exception, not the rule, and practice, discipline, being able to stick with it for the day, but be able to stick with it day after day after day after day.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to change your habits, and it takes a lot of discipline, and intentionality. And I think, that's part of my, that was part of my growth as well, is, just trying to be intentional about, rather than letting, the anxious thoughts spiral, in my mind, bringing, going to the Lord and bringing, taking those thoughts captive and bringing them to God and handing them over to him, and just really, trusting him with it, and, choosing and it's not easy, and just being intentional, and not going back to it, and not saying, okay, I'm going to take that back now, and just handing it over to him, and, trusting in who he is and his word. And it takes discipline. It takes discipline to be intentional, and to change those habits that you have. And I'm actually reading a book right now called Habits of the Household. And it's basically talking about how we can work in biblical, whether it's scripture, prayer, just ways that we can bring God into our life, into the habits of our life. Rather than just, grace before a meal, or a morning prayer and an evening prayer, but actually carrying God through us, with us throughout the day in all of our habits. And it takes discipline and intentionality because it's so easy. It's so easy to just go about our day and not think about God, not bring things to God, not, just, it's really hard. And one of the things that I've been praying about in the morning is God, prioritize my day for me. Help me to prioritize my day. And, it's amazing how much you can get done in your day when you've actually allowed God to be the priority. And it's just like Doug was saying, like it's discipline is, it's hard. And, you have to be intentional. You have to do things sometimes that, just your flesh is just, pulling you in one direction, but that, that's not where God wants you to go, or, that's not going to satisfy our spirit. It's hard. It's a battle every day. And one of the things that I've learned in Bible study is, I've always known about the armor of God. And I even taught Gemma how to put on the armor of God. And, she memorized it. I think she was 3 years old and memorized the armor of God. But one of the things that I learned in my Bible study was that it's not just the armor. Like, you need to activate that armor with prayer. And throughout this Bible study, we were called to write a prayer after every week based on the, actionable intel that we learned that week in the study, to put it into a prayer. So I did that, and I wrote, at the end of every week, I wrote a prayer for each piece of armor. And, I have tried to pray that every day. And, it just reminds us of, God's truths. And, we don't do these things in our own strength. It's through his strength that we are able to do the difficult things, change the habits, be intentional, take our eyes off of ourselves and put them on other people. And, look outside of us and see, like, what does that person need? And, just like you were saying, when you were on that flight, like, looking, towards your wife and, what does she need? What can I do to help? And I think that's one of the other, biggest issues with society today, is that we are such a self-focused, self-centered society. It's all about what makes me happy. Well, if it makes you happy, then you do that, and you have to, fix yourself first, and, love yourself first, and then you can love other people, and then you can, help other people. But I've got to focus on myself. I've got to, it all goes back to self. Yeah. And, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of times where, I'm selfish and I'm thinking about myself. But, is that a good day? No, it's not. But, just focusing on other people. It's not about us. It's about, the love that we show to other people. And when we take the focus off of ourselves, it it really changes your outlook. And I think the other important thing is gratitude. I've learned that this year, how important gratitude is. I tend to have that comparison. A good thing I don't do social media, because comparison is a big deal for me. I'll look in my backyard and I see weeds and dirt and like just it. We've got 10 acres of land, and I want so badly for our backyard around our house and near our pool to look pretty and nice. And then I go to a friend's house, where we have our Bible study, and like all of their landscaping is done. You look out their back door, the landscaping is beautiful. And I admitted this to them at Bible study. I was like, I compare. I do. And that's my problem. And I'll look out and I'll look out in my backyard, and then I start to get anxious. That comparison that I start, like, ooh, look where they are, and I want to be there. And the comparison will trigger these anxious thoughts. And I've learned to really, one of the things I've learned is that, I think you told me this, was that, the part of our brain where our anxious thoughts are is also where gratitude is. So we can't do both at the same time. We can't be thankful and anxious at the same time. And then in Bible study, come full circle, God, he does that. There's like so many things, that I've been learning, and I'm like, man, God is just really, through Bible study, through others, just, devotionals that I'll read in my email, just reminding me of these truths. But one of the things that I've started to put in practice is, as soon as I feel myself going to that comparison, what others may have and what I don't yet have, is just being gratitude for what God has put in my path, what God has, given me, and being grateful for where I am now, and immersing myself in where God has us, and, doing a good job where I am now. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do, but I've really been trying, and I've, been writing prayers for it to help me. But let me tell you, having a heart of gratitude, it really changes your outlook.
I think, Nicole, I think you just created another shirt for us. You said earlier, prayer and then practice. Like, put it in prayer, put it in practice. And, there's this, you're talking about the self part, going to self. We've all experienced it. The gravity of us just wanting to focus on us, me, is so strong for all of us. It's like, that's the brokenness, right? That's the fall of man. And I think it's impossible to get out of that gravity. First of all, like you said, if society is saying that's really where you do want to focus, you're going to get stuck. Mm-hmm. You're going to be so self-centered, and just, it's like a black hole of self, right? Black holes are, the strongest gravity in the universe, and you just get stuck there, and nothing good. They say light can't come out of a black hole. It's like, same for a person. If you're just like only about yourself, there's no light coming out at all, affecting anybody. And it takes that intentionality, like you were talking about. It takes that intentionality of what do I do so that I can escape from that black hole of self that we all face, and love prayer first. And then what am I going to do? Not just like stay in my head. There's a vocation for that, contemplatives and things like that. But for those of us who are lay people in the world, who are dealing with the world, second by second, prayer put it into practice. And then I would also say it's almost going to be kind of like circular, because as you start putting things into practice, the gravity of self starts sucking you back into self. And it's like, keep bringing the prayer up, like circle back to the prayer. And so the way I've been kind of experiencing that in my own life is, it's a little bit different, but similar to what you were saying is, I'm a CEO of a company. There's lots of pressure on CEOs. There's no one to point the finger to, basically. And so I start to have those worries and concerns about, the next day, the future, and all those kinds of things. And what the Lord put on my heart was like, look, Brett, I'm in control of all that, not you. So what I want you to do is simply focus on those on your team and how can you support them in their roles and make them excellent at the mission. That's all I want you to think about. That's what I want you to focus on. And I notice when I do that, it's amazing, but I have to do it intentionally, because the self keeps coming back in, oh, what's going to happen, and the fears and all those things. And then I think it's kind of the Holy Spirit tapping me on the shoulder going, stop doing that. Go back to what I asked you to do. Start praying about, how can I help this person be successful? Everybody on our team, we have a small team, everybody on your team, like, how can you help them be successful? How can you help them be successful? Again, it's outer focus. It's getting you out of the black hole of self. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, wow, lo and behold, amazing things really start to happen. And I think because it's in alignment, it's congruent with what God wants you to do. Love your neighbors yourself. That comes back in the sense that you start to have, as you were saying, you start to have peace, right? Anytime I'm in on myself in the black hole, I am not at peace at all. I'm anxious. That manifests itself physically. You get the butterflies, or, you lose your appetite, you frown. It's just, it's just not good. So yeah, that was a thought I had as you were talking about all that.
And to bring this, full circle back to, Sheepdog Brotherhood and the role that men play. Mm-hmm. And, I think, again, this spiritual battle of, women, it's a spiritual battle, right? Women, this feminist movement has sort of taken a whole new twist as this, like, I'm a woman and I can do anything and I don't need a man's help, and I don't, need, and it's degrading or disrespectful if a guy, thinks I can't open my own door or whatever it may be. Right.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, again, they're all selfish thoughts, right? It's all about me. And it's not about that. It's about respect, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think I was mentioning this to Doug before. One of the things, when we used to have cars, we didn't have the automatic, like, unlock, right? You had to unlock it with a key. Mm-hmm. And then you had, so when you went on a date, I remember this, like, when you went on a date with someone and the guy picked you up, he would go and he would open his, your side of the door, and he'd open the door for you and you'd get in. Well, what was, the woman supposed to do? Just sit there and let him go on the other side, unlock his door, open his door, and get it? No, you wanted to be a thoughtful person, right? Like, you lean over and you unlock that door for him. Yeah, so he doesn't have to do it with the key. You do it for him, because you're not, it's not about me. It's about, it's about being there for others and showing respect for others, and that love, right? When we have Christ's love in us, it's supposed to spill out to other people. Mm-hmm. And it's not about, like, I don't think you're able to do this, so I'm going to do it for you. It's not that kind of thing. It's more of this respect. It's, mm-hmm. You are, a woman who is created in God's image, and as a man who was created in God's image, I am going to show you respect and think beyond myself. And you know, and the woman has, you know, her role as well. But, you know, again, it was one of those things like you test the female. Is she going to open the door? Is she going to unlock the door for me? Or am I going to have to do it myself? And it told you a lot about that girl. And, you know, I admit I may have forgotten at kindergarten, but it was probably because I was focusing on something, you know, myself.
She also has really short arms, so sometimes she just couldn't reach the other side of the car.
You can blame it on the seatbelt. The seatbelt prevented me from being able to.
But seriously, you know, you'd lean over and you'd unlock the door. Why? Because, you know, you want to be kind, and you want to be respectful. And, you know, it's nothing to do with capabilities, you know, and again, it all goes back to the self, right?
Yeah.
You know, I can do anything. And, you know, and it's like, can you?
That's beautiful. Thank you, Nicole. We got to have you back on. You're like so much more interesting than Doug.
This is true. Yeah.
You're too kind.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to wrap it up for this 5th episode. You know, thank you, Nicole, for overcoming your fears and sitting on camera.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And Brett, you know, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy CEO schedule to be here and to sit down and talk about the Sheepdog Brotherhood.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.